In this video, we're going to continue to see tools and commands that the Junos CLI provides to help us configure the device in a faster, better way. So some of the commands we're going to see are enable us to delete configuration. If you come from the Cisco world, it's the equivalent of the no command. And another interesting thing that's Junos specific would be the deactivate option, which allows us to do pretty much the exact same thing from an operational standpoint, which is to remove that configuration or deactivate the function. But the interesting thing is that the configuration remains only with a tag of inactive, which is useful if, for example, we want to remove some part of the configuration, but only for a day or temporarily, so we can come back to it, or just keep it there for reference if we want to use it later on in the life of the device. So other commands we're going to be using and seeing as well are rename, replace, copy, and annotate, which allow us to manipulate some of the things in the configuration in a better or faster way. So let's see this on the CLI. So in this router, I have very little configuration. I have, for example, a management interface. So let's say that perhaps we want to delete the IP address on this management interface. So let's do that. Let's first use edit to go to that particular level, so we can see later on the difference between doing it from the top of the configuration to doing it actually on the particular level. So here, for example, we have that this EM5 interface has an IP address. Let's say we want to delete it, so let's ping it first. So as we can see, it's working. We are able to reach the device. So if we actually go ahead and do delete, it works pretty much the same way as set. So we do delete, and we can just delete the address, specify the address and the IP. If we do show compare, we can actually see it's telling us that the configuration now doesn't have that. So let's commit. If we do commit, we should be able to see it. The ping should stop, and we can check the configuration after, which shouldn't have the IP address for the management interface. So we can see the ping now it's failing, and if we do show, go to the top. If we do show, we can see that there's no IP address there. So I'm gonna roll back so we can see the deactivate function. So after I roll back, we should re-add that the IP address is going to be re-added to the configuration, and the ping should start working after the commit. We should be able to see it working again. And we can test the deactivate to see what's the difference. Because as we can see here, after we use delete, there's nothing else in the config. You can see it here. There's no IP address as there was before. So now the IP address is back. We can see it's pinging again. And we can also, we can do it from the same place, from the same level we did it before, but let's do it from the top so you can see this difference of how using edit will also help us, type smaller commands which are better understandable and less prone to errors. So let's go do it now. Let's do it from the top so you can see. Let's use deactivate. So we go deactivate interfaces, EM5, unit 0, family init, address, and the IP address. So see how long that command was. So we put that in there, and let's do show compare. And we can see it's pretty much the same thing, only with the tag of inactive. So that's telling us that from an operational standpoint, we will see the same thing. After I do commit, let's do that so we can actually see it. After I do commit, we'll stop seeing the ping work, but that will remain in the configuration just with the tag of inactive. So if you're just looking at the configuration, you can actually see, oh, this configuration was active at some point and somebody decided to deactivate it. It's still there, so you can look at it for reference, or you can re-enable it. But it's, from the operational standpoint, it has the same effect as delete, only that it keeps the configuration there. So if we go here, we can see that the ping stopped working. And if we go to R1 and check the configuration, Let's do a show again. We do a show again, we can see that now we have the inactive tag there. So the configuration is still there, only with an inactive tag, which causes the OS to just ignore it. So if we want to bring that back, we can do the same command, only with activate on the beginning. It will have the opposite effect, so it will enable the configuration. So we commit, we will see that we can ping again, and everything should be working fine. And we can see the ping start to work. So basically that's delete and deactivate, with a little mix of seeing what happens if you do it from the top of the configuration, if you actually go down to the level. So now let's see rename. Let's see the other useful commands. So rename, replace, copy, and annotate. So rename basically does what it says. So you can rename something that you created. Let's say that we have a firewall filter that we want to rename. So I think I don't have any firewall filters on this configuration, so let's create one. Let's create a firewall filter called rename me please. So we can create this firewall filter, and we can change the name. So let's use rename to change this firewall filter. So we'll use rename firewall filter, the firewall filter we just created, and let's change it to rename example. So we can see if we do show compare now, we can actually see that it changed. So we can see that we created it here with rename dash please, and after we did it, so we can see here that we created with this name, but we told it to rename dash example, and we can actually see it now on the show compare. That's pretty much how rename works. So what's the difference with replace? The difference with replace is that replace works to imagine that you have 15 or 20 or 25 different things called rename example, and you want to replace them all at the same time. So you would use replace. So you use replace. Let's see now. We tell replace, and you tell what you want to replace it with. Let's say we want that filter to be called replace example. And you look for a pattern in the configuration. So the pattern here, of course, it's rename example. So you do that, and we do show compare, and we can see how the name changed. The name was, as we can see here, rename example, and now changed to replace example. And if you had 20 or 25 things also called that match that pattern, that rename example, it will change as well. So useful and fast, a very fast way of changing this. Imagine that if you have to completely change your configuration, this was a production device, it would be many lines that otherwise you would have to copy and paste, and it would be error prone, and this way you can do it with a single command quite fast, and you can actually use regular expressions to do it. Copy, and the next command is copy, and it allows us to do exactly what it says. So imagine we have a firewall filter, and we want to copy that firewall filter, so we want to tweak it, because maybe the first one is in a particular interface, we want to copy the other one to adapt it to a second interface. So we can do that. Let's copy that firewall filter we have now. So we say copy firewall filter at the name of the filter, which now is replace example, and we copied it, let's say, we want to put copy example. So we do the command. When we do show compare, you can see now that we have an exact copy of replace example with called copy example. And like I said, it's a very useful thing. You can imagine that example. Instead of having to copy and paste it and modify it and tweak it, you can just do it with a single command. Very useful for day-to-day operations. And our final command is annotate, which basically serves to put little comments in the configuration. So since we're talking a lot about firewalls, so you put a note on the firewall section of the configuration, specifying some info that might be useful for a new network administrator, or it might be useful for you down the line in 6 months or maybe a year. So you can put something like, let's say, annotate. So let's say firewall and then a string. So you could say, firewall filters April 2011, version 2, security level yellow, or something that's meaningful for your organization. So that way, if you see this down the line, if you see this in November, you can say, oh, we put version 2 of our corporate firewall filters and we were at security level yellow, or something that's meaningful and helps you along the way. And it's always good to have comments and understanding why things are configured in the way that they are. So it's a way of doing that. You can do it in several sections of the configuration. And if you do show compare, we can actually see it here. We can see that this is telling the Junos OS that this is a comment, so this is a string you have to ignore. So, but if you do show configuration as I'm doing now, you can actually read it, and if it would be helpful for you down the line. So to summarize, we saw some very useful commands that we can use in our day-to-day operations on the Junos CLI to make our life a little bit easier and a little bit more optimal. So we saw how delete and deactivate are different in how they work, and we saw some other useful commands such as rename, replace, copy, and annotate to add some comments, to copy some elements, and to change their names as needed. So thank you.